And welcome to your second lesson on Islam practices, Muslim practices. I hope you're doing well and you're all doing your 9 a.m. exercises on the telly and keeping your spirits up. So let's have a look at this then. So we've done the first pillar, which is the Shahada. Now we're on to Salah, and we'll also look at some of the differences between the Shia and the Sunni Muslims. So what are we going to be doing? Well, we're going to look at the times of prayer, the preparation for prayer, how they pray, the different places they pray, and the reasons behind Muslim prayer. So as you can see, again, we've covered all of that, some of this, and now we're on to Salah as the 5 pillars. And we're actually covering some of the 10 obligatory acts as we go along, so this isn't really, all of that is probably going to take one lesson. So don't think we've got tons to do, because we really haven't. So let's have a little think then what we know about prayer already. So as we know, before I get going, it's useful for you to have access to the online textbook. So you can stop this and answer the questions as you go through, but I am using the textbook as I'm speaking to you, so mostly everything, I'll be giving you all the answers as we go through. So everything I'm saying is from the book anyway. The other thing that you need, there is one sheet to print off. If you don't have a printer, don't worry, just copy out 2 or 3 of the verses and explain them underneath when we get to that part. Okay, so as we know, prayer is how people connect with God or communicate with God, and it is a process by which they can deepen their faith. Also in groups, it means they have a shared experience, which is really important in Islam. As we go through, you see how they pray, you can see how very much it's a shared experience. In Islam, they are set prayers, very similar to liturgy, done in some of the more conservative Christian churches. So yeah, I suppose in a way it's comparable to a form of liturgical worship. Okay, so thinking back to types of prayer in Christianity, we have adoration, confession, contemplation, penitence, giving thanks and praise. All of those are elements in Salah. So again, very, very similar reasons, which makes sense because they all believe they're worshipping the same God. So the second pillar of Islam, called Salah, sometimes Salat, Muslims feel is their duty, and it is performed 5 times a day. So the first thing I'd like you to do is get the sheet that I mentioned earlier, and we could work out why Salah is so important to Muslims. There are 6 quotations, and all I'd like you to do really is try to, read them and then try and summarise what each one says about prayer. Okay, so put me on pause and go for it, and I won't see you, but yeah, figuratively I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Okay. Right, so let's, before we go through them, I do need to introduce you to this word, which comes up in the first quotation, which is prostrate. Notice, look, that it's prostrate, not prostate. Prostate is something completely different. Feel free to look it up, but we're not going to be talking about prostates today. We're looking at prostrating, which is lying stretched out on the ground with your face down. Both of these count as being prostrate. Okay? So here's your first one then. So exalt Allah with your praise. So this basically tells you that you should worship Allah, and the reason why they're on the ground, look, is because it says to prostrate. So be one of the people who prostrate themselves to Him. Okay, so that's why they do that. The second one here points out basically that prayer prevents people from doing bad things. Well, it would do, because if you're praying 5 times a day, spaced out throughout the day, then the idea is that your head is going to be in kind of like that God space all of the time. So you wouldn't be thinking about doing immoral things, because you'd only be thinking about God all day, every day. The next one, indeed those who believe and do righteous deeds, etc., etc., will have their reward. So another reason people pray, do good deeds, etc., is because they feel they will be rewarded for it. Now, I wouldn't have thought that would be their main intention, but it is part of why they do what they do. When you've completed, remember Allah standing, sitting, or lying on your sides. So the routines that they do in the prayer, the raka, which we'll look at later, they perform certain acts which symbolise that God is with them in all things that they do throughout their day. And the specific times, again it says here, prayer has been decreed upon the believers, a decree of a specific time. So that is why Muslims should pray at specific times. And the hadith from Muhammad, he says that prayer is vital for Islam, and if you don't pray, it weakens your whole faith. So in order to be a Muslim, you must pray. And finally, woe to those who pray but are unmindful of their prayer. So this is saying you must not go into prayer willy-nilly, but have the right intention, which we looked at last time, the niyyah, which is making sure you're in the right headspace for that prayer. So that is very important for them. In fact, I'm going to show you two videos, and in both of those videos, both the man and the young boy later talk about having that right intention, which is called niyyah. So really, really important in Islam. So I'm going to read to you the aims of prayer on 254. Have a little listen and see which ones you think, or which one it might be figured to be the most important to. So the aims of prayer are a constant reminder of the presence of God, to show submission to the will of God, to cleanse away the corruption of the world, to unite all Muslims, which, because they're praying 5 times a day, all facing the same direction, saying the same words, they've got that real sense of community there, to bring about peace in the world and to remove sins just as water removes dirt, so that symbolic action. And which one of those do you think then is the most important for Muslims? Personally, I think that the constant reminder of the presence of God would be the most important, because that kind of reflects the right headspace as well, the niyyah. Also, if you are being constantly reminded of the presence of God, there will be less corruption in the world because people are praying and being united with God. It will also bring about peace in the world. So really that first one, I think, covers quite a lot more than the first one. It covers the other ones as well. Okay. I think I've lost my space now. Hang on a sec. Where am I? No. Here we go. So let's have a look at these then, which I think we've kind of answered. So how is prayer viewed by Muslims? Well, it's seen as a duty. It is a pillar, and the purpose of it is to give thanks and show they are submitting to Allah's will. It is a physical, mental and spiritual activity that brings them closer to God, or ritual rather than activity. And again, we've looked at the niyyah. It is having the right mindset and going into that prayer with that meaningful purpose, not like waking up and thinking, oh, it's too early, I've got to pray, but actually having the right intention. I'm going to show you the first video now. In this first video, we're going to go to a mosque in America where a man is going to show you how they prepare to get into that niyyah, that right mindset, that right frame of mind for prayer, and pay particular attention to the reasons for this washing ritual.
Muslims can pray anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a mosque. But no matter where you are in the world, you always face towards the same place, the Kaaba in the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. You just have to know which direction it's in.
If you're anywhere, you can always pray. Just to figure out direction of Mecca. So you put a compass on the floor and check how many degrees it is. First action of prayer is your intention. So you stand on the prayer mat and you think, who are you praying to and what are you praying? You raise your hands like this and then you say Allahu Akbar, and once you've said that, you've started your prayer.
Hang on a minute, that's the wrong video. Let me just see if I can flick onto the right video fast. Give me a minute. Sorry about that, guys. That's the wrong video. The wrong video. Islam practices, Miss P's lessons. Oh, you're getting into the secrets of my lessons now. There it is. My apologies for that, guys. We'll have to watch it on this. Sorry about that. Here you go.
Each day we pray is like we have an established appointment before God. And just like if you have some important appointments, you want to make sure that you're clean. We want to represent our best before our Creator. So the first thing, when it's time for prayer, we say, am I clean? That cleanliness is a process. It starts with your intentions. In basic terms, it's I intend to make the ablution in preparation to stand in obedience before my Lord. The first thing you do after you make your intentions is you actually wash your hands. Make sure your hands are clean before you start to begin the ritual washing. He's going to begin by washing the right hand 3 times and then the left hand 3 times. My actions are motivated spiritually, mentally, and then also physically. So that's what the 3 times represents. Now he's going to wash his mouth 3 times. I need my mouth to be clean. So it will be consistent with my actions. I wouldn't do something and say something else. The Quran says our life should be in agreement with what we say. And then he's going to wash his nose, and that'll be followed by the whole face 3 times. So now I'm going through a process. We think, we act, we defend, we seek to purify ourselves in our spirit. This time he's going to focus on just the arms and not the hands. Just do the right arm first and then the left arm. And now he's just going to wipe over his hair from the front to the back, and then he's going to clean out both ears, and then now he'll be going from there to the feet. He's going to do the right foot first, up to the ankle 3 times. And he's going to go to the left also 3 times. But he'll make just a small prayer, asking God to give him light, bless him to shine. That completes the ritual washing called wudu. There's a common expression that says cleanliness is next to godliness. This is a part of what's in the spirit of what came from the prophet, peace be upon him, and what the Quran also gives us about being clean.
Right, my apologies, guys. I've got to try and put this back for you again. I'm going to flick through these slides really fast now. Oh, sorry about that. I put the wrong video in the wrong slide, so I didn't want to restart the whole thing again because this is already my 2nd time. Just nearly there. There you go, just recapping. There we go. Right, so let's have a look at these questions here then. Oh, stop. Now I'm going too far. There you go. So the symbolism behind the wudu, why is it important that Muslims are clean when they pray? Well, you heard him say at the end, cleanliness is next to godliness. That is a very well known, actually a British saying, and Christians use that expression as well. You know, so this spiritual cleansing, I like to kind of link this idea to baptism in Christianity. It's a symbolic action that has a much deeper meaning. The symbolism behind the wudu then is also, it's an outward sign of their niyyah, their intent. The significance of doing it 3 times is, as I say earlier, that it is a physical, mental and spiritual act. So the 3 times is for physical, mental and spiritual, all the different aspects of a person's being, which is why they do each act 3 times. The significance of washing the mouth and ears, was from the video there, is that you're washing your mouth with the intent to say that the words that you speak are going to match up with the actions that you do, and the things that you hear, you're only going to be hearing or focused on the prayer and the ritual itself. So thinking of a practical reason why the wudu might be encouraged. So in the past, if you can think of that Islam is from a kind of a hot, dusty country in the Middle East, that people, their feet would have been kind of dirty and dusty. So as well as it being this spiritual thing, in the past doing this act would mean that they are literally clean as well as spiritually clean, and they pray on the floor together in a mosque. So it kind of makes sense from a practical perspective as well as a spiritual perspective. So let's have a look at Salah. So Muslims pray 5 times a day, we've already established that, and they can pray anywhere as long as it is safe and clean. I mean, I think I told you when I was working on the cruise ships, when I went to Egypt, when the call to prayer went out, people would literally come out into the streets there and put their mats down and pray. And the shops would remain open, there was never any problems or anything like that. People would just literally all get together, face Mecca, which is important, and pray. So the Qibla, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, is important, is kind of like expressing the unity of Muslims, and they all face the sacred mosque or the Kaaba in Mecca. Okay. So, I've done it again, just a second. So why pray 5 times a day is the next question. I'm just going to go straight to the textbook from that. And there's a story that according to the story, Muhammad was woken from his sleep and taken on a winged horse to Jerusalem and up through the 7 levels of heaven to the presence of God. And God reveals to the Prophet Muhammad that Muslims must pray continuously 50 times a day, and that worship must be a constant present throughout life. However, according to the story, Moses intervened and said, actually, that's too much, and an agreement was reached where there must be 5 prayers each day. Now, there are 5 different types of prayer. Don't think I've got those written down anywhere. Or the 5 times when they pray, sorry, I've called 5 different things. You don't really need to know them. They've got different names and have different meanings. And the Sunni Muslims pray 5 times a day, but the Shia Muslims, they pray 3 times a day and join 2 of them together. So, or 2 2s and a 1. So they will only pray 3 times a day. Okay, so the video I'm going to show you now is of prayer and how they pray and what happens, and the rakas, which is a sequence of movements that follow a set pattern. So have a look, see what you think.
Muslims can pray anywhere, it doesn't have to be in a mosque. But no matter where you are in the world, you always face towards the same place, the Kaaba in the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. You just have to know which direction it's in.
If you're anywhere, you can always pray. You just have to figure out direction of Mecca. So you put a compass on the floor and check how many degrees it is. First action of prayer is your intention. So you stand on the prayer mat and you think, who are you praying to and what are you praying? You raise your hands like this and then you say Allahu Akbar. And once you've said that, you've started your prayer. When you're making the intention, you're remembering that God is in front of you and He's listening to you while you're praying. He can hear you and He's listening and He'll respond. We do a set number of actions in a certain order. It's to unite your mind and soul and body all together. The first thing I say in my mind is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This means in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. There are 99 names of Allah. All of them, they all describe Him. But one of my favourite names is probably Al-Khaliq, which means the Creator. That really has a big impact on the way I live life and refer to Him as, because when you pray, if you think He's the Creator, you don't have any other doubts or anything. You just know He's the Creator, so He just deserves to be prayed to.
When Muslims kneel down in prayer, only the palms, knees, forehead, and nose touch the ground. At the end of the prayer ritual, we bless the two angels who keep an eye on us in everything we do.
There's one angel on your right shoulder and one on your left. The angel that records the good deeds is on your right, and the angel that records your bad deeds are on the left. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. You feel this kind of connection with Allah, like you're talking to Him. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. The morning prayer is really early in the morning, so that can get a bit tiring, but you shouldn't think, oh, now it's prayer time. You should think, yes, it's prayer time, so now I can pray. The feeling of everyone is doing the same thing, and you're all praying to the same God in the same way, in the same language. The way that you call a Muslim a brother and a Muslim lady a sister. It's like you have a connection with everyone, and you feel like all the Muslims are together and you're praying to one thing. So it feels really united.
The prayer ritual is over 1,400 years old. It's repeated 5 times a day by millions of Muslims like Kaisan all over the world.
There you go. Bless him. I like his little smile. So looking at the raka in more detail, this is simply a set pattern of movements. Now each movement has a different name and a different meaning, from standing to prostrating to bowing to kneeling, and all of them have words that go along with it. And then at the end of that, when this question here, what is the symbolism of the ending salah, looking over your shoulders, is addressing the angels, one on each shoulder, and acknowledging them, that one is recording your good deeds and one your not so good deeds. So this formulaic structure, I like to, again, I've said before, I like to link this back to, it's similar to liturgy. So you've got this formulaic structure, it's keeping you focused on the job at hand, which is, worshipping Allah, and your focus is totally on God. It means that you always know what to do, nobody feels uncomfortable, and there is this comfort and unity in knowing that everybody else around you is sharing this experience with you. And the purpose behind the raka, again, is this idea that God is everywhere, in everything in life that you do. So the standing, the kneeling, the prostrating, the sitting, and all of that is this idea that Allah is with you through all your trials of life. We're nearly there, so a couple of other little bits to know, and that is, I don't know how to pronounce this properly either, the Jumu'ah. And the Jumu'ah is the congregational prayer, okay, and it is every Friday about midday, and Muslim men only are expected to gather for the Friday prayer. Women may attend, but it's not compulsory, but they usually just pray at home. And during that time they have a sermon from the imam at the mosque. It is not anything like Shabbat or Sunday worship. It's not considered a Sabbath or anything like that. It's not seen as a holy day. In some Muslim countries, it's the day of rest, but generally, it's not really the same. It's not seen as a holy day. Okay, so that is Friday prayers at the mosque are seen as very, very important. And then there's two other kinds of, or two other prayers, and one of those is the dua. And the dua is like personal prayer. So these are done on top of an extra 2, the 5 times a day. But but that's for people to do their own personal worship with God or communication with God. It's spontaneous and doesn't have a set pattern or anything like that. And if Muslims miss a prayer, then it says in the Quran that they should find time to catch up the time for when they miss. And I was struggling to think about what are valid reasons for missing prayer, and I would say that probably if someone was ill, that would be an appropriate time. And I think things have changed in modern society. For example, if you were stuck in traffic on the M25, there's no way you're going to whap out your mat and start praying. So, I think it's down to conscience what is a good reason to miss prayer. So looking at the difference between Sunni and Shia, I think we've kind of covered it really. I said Shia pray 3 times a day because they combine some of the movements, the rak'ah movement, the 5 periods of time. 5 times a day there's a set of rak'ah that they do for each of those times, and the Shia Muslims join them together, so they only pray 3 times a day. Okay, and the other thing that they have is the use of a clay tablet. Let me show you. So the Shia use this clay tablet here in their prayer. Now Muslims can pray anywhere, but the Shia take it quite literally that your head should touch the ground, and they say that as meaning the literal earth. And so therefore if they were praying indoors, their head wouldn't be touching the literal earth, so they have this clay tablet that they would put their head on rather than straight onto the ground, so it's touching the earth. All right, typical kinds of questions to go through. This isn't in the 2 assessments that I'm going to give you the options to do, but useful arguments that you might be able to use in some of those that come up anyway. And these types of 15-mark questions are quite common. Salah is the most important duty of all Muslims. So the argument here is, yes, it is the most important, and here are the reasons why. Arguing with, but this might be more important, or this might be more important, and if it was important, why not this? So some of the arguments in favour of Salah being the most important duty of all Muslims, as you saw in the beginning, there are 6 quotations and lots more from the Quran and the Hadith supporting why it is important and the implications of not worshipping. It fosters a closeness to God, for example. If you don't do it, then you're not going to access heaven. The story of the night journey, where I told you that God said, you've got to pray 50 times a day, and it was negotiated with Moses that it was reduced to 5, shows the importance of it. 50 times a day is quite a lot. The purposes of Salah are vital for Islam. The idea of keeping God in your mind all the time prevents people from doing bad things, could be seen as a reason why it's the most important. And we can see it is hugely important because the amount of preparation that goes into each of those 5 prayer times is huge, with the wudu, etc., and the niyyah. And arguments against or for other things being more important. So if it's so important, why isn't it the first pillar? So we could then say, actually, no, the Shahada is more important, and here are the reasons why. There aren't any serious punishments put in place for missing prayers, it's just catch them up. If it's so important, then how come women don't do the same as men when it comes to Friday prayer? There are 5 pillars, so does that show that they're all of equal importance? Okay, surely good deeds, which we'll look at next lesson, which is zakah, is also needed. Okay, and again, performing prayer is not enough. You also have to have niyyah, so maybe niyyah itself is the right intention for all of the pillars is more important than prayer itself. And salah is important, but what about dua? Okay, could personal prayers be argued to be just as important? So lots of arguments for and against there, and practical issues. Finishing off, it could be tricky for Muslims praying 5 times a day. Muslims will really have to work. It would be difficult for them in the Western world, for example, to be able to fit this into a Western schedule. But there are a lot of Muslims in the country, and they do seem to manage. Okay, and they'll probably have to miss out on meals or that kind of thing, etc. A little boy said he has to get up especially early, but he does it in the right frame of mind. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Salah, done, dusted, finished. Everything on there that you need to know. So, yeah. Next one, lesson 3, I think, is Zakah. Hang on, let me just double check. Pretty sure it is. Yeah. So the next one is Zakah. So I'll probably have that one up for you. Well, by the time you do this one, you've probably got the other one as well. Enjoy the rest of your day.